You're listening to Reverie, True Crime, your gateway to the darkest corners of human nature, where we expose the hidden truths of human depravity. These harrowing stories serve as a sobering reminder to keep our senses keen and our awareness sharp, for predators lurk in unexpected places, patiently waiting and observing. Join us as we unravel mysteries, explore motives, and seek justice for victims as we bring awareness to these cases. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. Over the past 3 episodes, we've told the story of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. They were 2 young people with bright futures who were kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in January of 2007. We've documented the horrific crimes committed against them, the investigation that led to 5 arrests, the trials that resulted in convictions, and the judicial scandal that forced retrials and extended the family's agony for more than a decade. Now, in this final episode, we look at where the perpetrators are today, the laws that were passed in Channon and Chris's names, the family's ongoing fight for justice, and the legacy that these 2 young people left behind. Let's get started. As of 2025, all 5 perpetrators remain in prison. None have been released and will likely never be released. Here's where each one stands. Lamarcus Davidson, age 43. His location? Death row at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville, Tennessee. His sentence? The death penalty. Current status? Lamarcus Davidson has been on death row since 2009. His appeals have been consistently denied by Tennessee courts. In 2016, the Tennessee Supreme Court affirmed his convictions and death sentence. In 2021, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals again denied his appeals. Lamarcus Davidson's execution date has not been set. Tennessee has not executed anyone since 2020 due to litigation over execution protocols. But Lamarcus Davidson remains on death row, awaiting his fate. Latalvis Cobbins, age 42. His location is Tennessee State Prison. His sentence? Life without the possibility of parole. His current status? Latalvis Cobbins has exhausted most of his appeals. In 2014, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed his convictions. He will die in prison. There is no chance of parole or release. Latalvis Cobbins will spend the rest of his life behind bars for what he did to Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. George Thomas, age 41. His location is Tennessee State Prison. His sentence? 50 years, reduced from 127 years in exchange for testimony against Eric Boyd. George will be eligible for parole consideration in 2053. He will be 76 years old if he lives that long. Given the nature of his crimes and the opposition from the victims' families, it's unlikely he will ever be released, even if technically eligible. Vanessa Coleman, age 36. Her location? Tennessee Prison for Women. Her sentence is 35 years. Vanessa will be eligible for parole in early 2034. She's the only defendant with a realistic, though still unlikely, chance of eventual release. The victims' families have vowed to oppose her parole at every hearing. Shannon's mother, Dina Christian, has stated, quote, "As long as I'm breathing, I'll be there to make sure she stays in prison." Eric Boyd, age 51. His location is Tennessee State Prison. His sentence is 2 consecutive life sentences plus 90 years. His current status: Eric Boyd filed appeals challenging his 2019 convictions, arguing that his trial should have been moved out of Knox County due to publicity, and that he was denied his right to a speedy trial since the crimes occurred 12 years before his state indictment. In March of 2022, the Tennessee Supreme Court denied his appeal, affirming his convictions. Eric Boyd will die in prison. There is no possibility of release. The 5 people who destroyed Channon and Chris will never be free again. For the families, this is justice. Imperfect, delayed, but justice nonetheless. From the beginning, Gary and Dina Christian and Hugh and Mary Newsom made a promise. Their children's deaths would not be in vain. They would fight to change the system that had failed them. They would ensure that other families wouldn't have to endure what they did. And they succeeded. On June 13, 2014, Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam signed 2 pieces of legislation into law. They were named after the victims. First, we have the Christian Newsom Act. This law eliminated the 13th juror rule in Tennessee. The 13th juror rule was an old provision that required a judge to sign and validate a jury verdict before it became official. In theory, this gave judges the ability to review verdicts and ensure they were legally sound. In practice, it meant that a corrupt or impaired judge, like Richard Baumgartner, could potentially interfere with verdicts. When Judge Baumgartner's drug addiction came to light, one of the issues raised was whether he was capable of performing his 13th juror duty when he signed off on the Christian Newsom verdicts. This uncertainty contributed to the retrials being granted. The Chris Newsom Act changed that. Now, once a jury delivers a unanimous verdict, it is final. The judge does not have to sign it. The judge cannot interfere with it, and the jury's decision stands. Gary Christian later said, quote, "Every time something comes up in a courtroom and the district attorney stands up and quotes the Channon Christian Act or the Chris Newsom Act, they're never going to be forgotten." End quote. And then we have the Channon Christian Act. This law prevents attorneys from introducing evidence or allegations about a victim's past behavior if that behavior is not relevant to the case. During the trials, defense attorneys attempted to attack Shannon's character. They wanted to introduce allegations about her personal life, her relationships, her behavior, anything to make the jury see her as less sympathetic, less innocent, or less worthy of justice. Dina Christian sat through these attempts and felt her daughter being victimized all over again. She said, quote, "It was painful. They were trying to make her look bad. They were trying to blame her for what happened to her." End quote. The Channon Christian Act now protects victims from this kind of character assassination. If the victim's past is not directly relevant to the facts of the case, it cannot be introduced as evidence. Victims cannot be put on trial for their own murders. These 2 laws are Channon and Chris's legacy in the Tennessee legal system. They protect future victims and ensure fairer trials. They are permanent reminders that these two young people mattered, that their deaths changed something. The laws are not the only legacy. There's the Channon Gail Christian Memorial Golf Tournament and Scholarship Fund. Since 2008, the Christian family has held an annual golf tournament in Channon's memory. The tournament raises money for scholarships for female graduates of Farragut High School, and later expanded to other East Tennessee schools, who plan to attend the University of Tennessee just as Channon did. Dozens of scholarships have been awarded over the years. Young women who never met Channon Christian are able to pursue their education because of her. In her death, she is helping others achieve the dreams she never got to fulfill. There's also the Chris Newsom Memorial Baseball Tournament and Scholarship. The Newsom family established a memorial baseball tournament and scholarship fund in Chris's name. Every year, the tournament is held at Hall's Community Park, and scholarships are awarded to Hall's high school baseball players. Mary Newsom said, quote, "We spent most of Chris's life playing ball on the ball field, and I think this brings back a lot of good memories that we've had with him. I think he would be very proud that we're doing this and that he can still be involved with baseball. I feel his presence when we're out there." End quote. To date, the Chris Newsom Memorial Foundation has awarded 42 scholarships totaling $42,000. The house at 2316 Chipman Street, the place where Channon was tortured and murdered, was purchased in 2008 by Waste Connections. Waste Connections is a national garbage collection company with a depot on the adjacent lot. In October of 2008, Waste Connections demolished the house. They couldn't let it stand. Too much evil had happened there. In its place, they erected a memorial dedication to Channon and Christopher. A tree was planted and a marker was installed. The site is now a place of remembrance and not horror. Visitors still leave flowers there, and strangers who never knew Channon or Chris stop to pay their respects. The memorial ensures that even the physical location of the crimes has been changed into something good. We cannot tell this story without addressing the elephant in the room: race. Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom were white. All 5 of their killers were black. And from the very beginning, this case became a flashpoint in America's ongoing, painful conversation about race, crime, media coverage, and hate crimes. In the weeks following the murders, some conservative commentators and online activists claimed that the case was being deliberately ignored by the national media because the victims were white and the perpetrators were black. They argued that if the races had been reversed, if 5 white people had kidnapped, raped, tortured, and killed a young black couple, it would have been national news, covered by CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and every major outlet. Political commentator Michelle Malkin wrote about the case on her blog and discussed it on Fox News' The O'Reilly Factor, arguing that media bias was preventing the story from getting the attention it deserved. On May 27, 2007, fewer than 30 white supremacists led by neo-Nazi Alex Linder held a rally in downtown Knoxville to protest what they called black-on-white crime. Linder was arrested at the rally and charged with disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and assault on a police officer. The victims' families did not support this rally. Gary Christian, Shannon's father, addressed those who he believed were using his daughter's death to further their agenda. He said forcefully, quote, "This ain't about you," end quote. Some people, including Christopher Newsom's mother, Mary, believed that the crimes were motivated by racial hatred. She said, quote, "If this wasn't a hate crime, then I don't know how you would define a hate crime. It may have started out as a carjacking, but what it developed into was blacks hating whites. To do the things they did, they would have to hate them to do that," end quote. Others disagreed. Law enforcement officials, prosecutors, and even leaders in the black community said there was no evidence that these crimes were racially motivated. Reverend Ezra Mays, president of the Knoxville chapter of the NAACP, addressed the case directly, saying, quote, "It doesn't make me uncomfortable speaking out against this crime because it was African Americans committing a crime against Caucasians. It's not a black and white issue. It's a right and wrong issue. Those who committed this crime were unjust in doing so, and they should pay the penalty," end quote. Then Knox County Sheriff Jimmy Jones said in May of 2007, quote, "I haven't seen any evidence to indicate that this is a hate crime, and I interviewed 2 of these suspects. I believe these people were evil. I believe it was a plan," end quote. Prosecutors never pursued hate crime charges. The evidence suggested that Channon and Chris were targeted not because of their race, but because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time with a vehicle that LaMarcus Davidson wanted. The torture that followed was about power, control, and sadism, not about race. LaMarcus was a career criminal who needed money and a car. Channon and Chris were simply victims of opportunity. Was the case ignored by national media? The answer is complicated. The Knoxville News Sentinel, the local newspaper, covered the case extensively from the beginning. Local TV stations like WBIR, WATE, and WVLT reported on every development. Court TV covered the trials. But it is true that in early 2007, national cable news networks did not give the case the same level of attention that they gave to other high-profile crimes. There were no Anderson Cooper specials, no Nancy Grace crusades, at least not initially, and no wall-to-wall coverage on MSNBC or CNN. So why is that? Journalists who covered the case have offered several different explanations. The crimes occurred in January of 2007, at a time when national news was dominated by the Iraq War and the 2008 presidential election buildup. The case was gruesome, but it was a local crime, not a national story with broader implications. The victims were not celebrities or public figures. Also, the case was resolved relatively quickly with arrests and convictions, which made it less of an ongoing story. Others have argued that the national media has a bias toward covering crimes that fit certain narratives, particularly white on black crime, and this case didn't fit that narrative, so it was ignored. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Media coverage decisions are complex and influenced by many factors. You've got newsworthiness, audience interest, available resources, editorial priorities, and yes, sometimes bias, conscious or unconscious. What is undeniable is that the case did eventually receive significant national attention, particularly during the trials and after the Judge Baumgartner scandal. ABC News Primetime did an extensive investigation. Oxygen Network featured the case on Injustice with Nancy Grace. And there are countless true crime podcast episodes, documentaries, and articles that have covered the story. The families themselves have mixed feelings about the racial controversy. They want their children remembered. They want justice. They don't want the story to be hijacked by people with political agendas on either side. Gary Christian put it best when he said, quote, "This ain't about you," end quote. It's about Channon and Chris. It's about two young people who were murdered. It's about holding their killers accountable, and it's about justice. The race of the victims and the perpetrators is a fact, but it's not the most important fact. The most important fact is that 5 evil people tortured and killed 2 innocent people, and they're now paying for it with their freedom. That is what matters. Dina Christian said in 2017, quote, "Even after 10 years, it doesn't go away." People on social media were saying, "Why is the media bringing it up?" They were chastising the media. And it's like, I don't ever want anybody to forget Channon and Chris. Those were 2 wonderful kids with great, bright futures who did nothing wrong. End quote. For Gary and Dina Christian, and for Hugh and Mary Newsom, the fight has never ended. By 2025, the families have attended 8 separate trials. They have sat through countless appeals hearings, parole proceedings, and court motions. They have heard the details of their children's murders repeated over and over. They have seen the perpetrators in person dozens of times. They have faced reporters, answered questions, given interviews, and spoken at churches and community events. They were told from the beginning, this will be a lifelong commitment. And it has been. The Newsoms, in particular, spent years lobbying prosecutors to charge Eric Boyd with murder. They hired a private investigator to gather evidence. They wrote letters, they made phone calls, and they refused to give up. Mary Newsom said, quote, 12 years ago, we made a promise to Chris that we would get whoever did this. And today, we got that. Justice was served. End quote. When Eric Boyd was finally convicted in 2019, the Newsoms could finally breathe. All 5 perpetrators were now convicted of murder. The fight was over. Or was it? Because as long as any of the perpetrators are alive, there will be appeals. There will be parole hearings, like for Vanessa. There will be legal motions and challenges. And the families will be there every time, opposing, fighting, remembering. Of all the family members, Gary Christian's journey has perhaps been the most remarkable. For years after Channon's murder, Gary Christian was consumed by anger. Who could blame him? His daughter was tortured and killed in the most brutal way imaginable. The perpetrators showed no remorse, and the judicial system kept forcing him to relive the nightmare. Gary Christian was angry at the killers and the system. He was angry at God. But in the spring of 2017, something changed. Gary Christian gave his life to Christ and asked God to restore him from his pervasive anger. He began speaking at churches throughout Tennessee, sharing his story and his testimony. In his speeches, Gary talks honestly about the anger that he felt. He doesn't minimize it or pretend it wasn't justified, but he also talks about how that anger was destroying him, consuming him, and preventing him from living. He talks about forgiveness, not because the perpetrators deserve it, but because he needed it for his own healing. Gary Christian's message is powerful. You can seek justice and still find peace. You can remember your loved ones without being destroyed by hatred. You can honor the dead by choosing to live. It's a message that resonates with other victims' families who face similar struggles. Hugh and Mary Newsom have also shown extraordinary strength. They have fought tirelessly for justice for their son. They have created lasting memorials and scholarships. They have spoken out, given interviews, and refused to let Chris be forgotten. But they have also been honest about the toll it has taken. Quote, "For him to be tortured, for both of them to be tortured the way that they were, it just breaks my heart," Mary said. "It just really tears me apart." The Newsoms have said that the time around January 7th is always the hardest. Every year, when that anniversary comes around, they relive it. They remember the day they learned Chris was dead. They remember identifying his body and the beginning of the nightmare. But they also remember the good times, like the baseball games, the laughter, the dreams that Chris had for the future, and they make sure his memory stays alive. So, what can we learn from the murders of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom? Well, I've written down 5 things that we can learn, and if you have more, I would love to hear your thoughts on social media. So, number 1, evil exists. This case forces us to confront a difficult truth, that some people are capable of unspeakable evil, not because of their race, their upbringing, or their circumstances, but because they choose to be. Lamarcus Davidson, Latalvis Cobbins, George Thomas, Eric Boyd, and Vanessa Coleman made choices. They chose to carjack 2 innocent people. They chose to torture them. They chose to rape them, and they chose to kill them. We can debate nature versus nurture. We can discuss systemic factors and social conditions, but at the end of the day, these 5 people had agency. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but they did it anyway. And society has an obligation to hold them accountable. Number 2, the importance of judicial integrity. The Judge Baumgartner scandal showed us how fragile our justice system can be. One corrupt judge with a drug addiction nearly derailed years of work by prosecutors, investigators, and the victims' families. The Christian Newsom case led to real reforms in Tennessee, but it also serves as a warning that we must demand integrity from those who hold power in our legal system. Judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, they all have immense power over people's lives, and they must be held to the highest standards. Number 3, victims' rights matter. The Channon Christian Act and the Chris Newsom Act protect victims and their families from secondary victimization by the legal system itself. These laws recognize that victims are not just pieces of evidence. They are people with dignity who deserve respect even after death. Number 4, The long road to justice. Justice in this case took more than a decade. From January of 2007 to August of 2019, the families fought and they waited. 8 trials, multiple appeals, a judicial scandal, and retrials. But they never gave up. Their persistence is a testament to the power of love and the human spirit's capacity for endurance. And the 5th lesson, memory and meaning. Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom did not die in vain. Their names are now attached to laws that protect others. Scholarships bear their names, memorials honor them, and their families have ensured that their lives, not just their deaths, are remembered. That's what families of murder victims do. They fight to ensure that their loved ones are more than just victims. They were people. They had dreams, and they mattered. They will always matter. On a spring day in Knoxville, Tennessee, young people gather for a golf tournament. They're competing for scholarships, money that will help them attend the University of Tennessee, just like Channon Christian planned to do. On a summer evening, children play baseball at Hall's Community Park. A tournament is underway, honoring the memory of a young man who loved the game, who once played on these same fields, and who dreamed of bigger things. In a quiet cemetery, flowers are placed on 2 graves. Strangers who never knew Channon or Chris stopped to pay their respects. They've heard the story, and they wanted to honor these young people. And on Chipman Street, where a house of horrors once stood, there is now a memorial. There's a tree that grows and a plaque that remembers. The place where evil happened has been reclaimed. Channon Gail Christian was 21 years old when she died. She loved golf. She was studying sociology at the University of Tennessee. She had a smile that could light up a room. She cared about people. She was loved by her parents, her friends, and everyone who knew her. She should have graduated in December of 2007, and she should have had a career, a family, and decades of life ahead of her. Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr. was 23 years old when he died. He loved baseball. He was a talented carpenter whose work can still be seen in homes throughout Knox County. He was falling in love with a girl named Channon. He was kind, hardworking, and genuine. He should have had a future full of possibility. They were not just victims, they were people. And 18 years later, in 2025, they are still remembered. Their families have never stopped fighting for them. Their names are attached to laws that protect others. Scholarships help young people achieve dreams, and memorials ensure that they are not forgotten. The 5 people who tortured and killed them will never be free. Justice, imperfect as it is, has been served. But more than that, Channon and Chris's legacy is one of love conquering evil, of families refusing to let hatred destroy them, of communities coming together to remember and honor 2 young people who did nothing wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time. On January 6, 2007, Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom planned to have dinner, watch a movie, and go to a friend's party. It was supposed to be a normal Saturday night. Instead, it became the beginning of one of the most brutal crime sagas in Tennessee history. But it also became a story of resilience, of justice, of love that endures even in the face of unimaginable horror. Channon and Chris are gone, but they are not forgotten. Their families made sure of that. And as long as there are people who remember them, not as victims, but as the vibrant, beautiful, beloved people they were, their story will continue. Thank you so much for listening to this series and this episode. Until next time, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode. As we close out, let us not forget awareness is our greatest defense. In a world that can be dark and grim, vigilance is our beacon of hope. When it comes to the cases we have explored together that have remained unsolved, if you happen to hold a piece of the puzzle, dare to step forward. As author Lois McMaster Bujold once said, "The dead cannot cry out for justice. It is a duty of the living to do so for them." Until we reconvene, my friends, stay vigilant and stay informed.